So, firstly, Young Muhammad, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you again for the breakfast session with your full and frank sharing. Now, this is not quite an intimate room for Chatham House rules, but we will please observe that. Not too many snapshots and recording of what we're about to discuss. Now, I have copious notes. No, I'm only teasing. Now, firstly, welcome to Invest Malaysia and welcome all our guests today on behalf of Bursa and Maybank. I should say that again. Now, the key thing is the Honourable Prime Minister has highlighted the challenges that we're facing. We'll wait and see where the feedback's coming from, sir. Has highlighted our national debt, the need to, we're moving into slowing economic growth. Now, where we are in resetting the economy is one of the key themes under the 12th Malaysia Plan. We've emerged from the pandemic and we're under a new unity government. We have clarity. If you could share with us, what are the priority areas involving respective stakeholders amid the rising cost of living, challenges for the rakyat, the rise of cost of doing business for MSMEs, and the increasing the competitiveness for Malaysia's exports, especially larger corporations. For the rakyat, you mentioned last month during the fourth quarter GDP release on the future of economic programs to be geared towards addressing two key elements, cost of living and, of course, income. And I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate you on the initiative Pendapatan Rakyat, IPR, launched on 26th of February. But what are its challenges and what other initiatives are in the works to address cost of living and the cost of doing business? So.
Thank you, to Omar. Ladies and gentlemen. So I try to imagine how it feels to be in your place now, listening to yet another minister, and this is the fourth administration in about 4 years. So I'm fully aware of, the bar that I have to overcome, because most probably there's a lot of skepticism around. Most probably you've heard it all. Most probably you've seen it all. That's why I think what we hope we will do better, and this is why we need to constantly talk to each other from the public sector and the private sector, is to get everyone on board to diagnose correctly and to fix the root causes correctly. And when it comes to the diagnosis, I think everyone understands. We inherit public finance with 1.5 trillion. We have a public that is very restless because of the mismatch between wages growth and cost of living. In this room, for example, we are fully aware that if we don't do something and if we continue as if it's business as usual, the very essence of Malaysia as an attractive investment hub is at stake. So to start with what Dr. Omar asked, I think we have to juggle. I mean, when I say we, I mean Dr. Sri Anwar, myself, and the economic team of the new administration has to juggle different problems at the same time that require different approaches. To the public, economics performance is only represented by two things: how much they pay for their lunches and breakfast, and how much they get every month. So it's all about cost of living and inflation and salary. of course, at our level, at the macro level, and you guys represent the bulk of our economy, we understand it's a lot more complicated than that. And the reason why we have this stagnation in wages is because of the structure of the economy. So hence why the first 2-3 months were focused mainly to address the demands of the public first. We focus very much about harga ayam, telur, getting people into schemes where they can be deployed into areas that are not just economically strategic, but politically strategic. Because we need to manage that so that at the same time, when we focus on fixing the core structural issues of the economy and the public finances, which will take a long time, we can manage the public pressure and the public demand. Because one thing that we need to do much better this time around is to stay longer on the problem. Because successively, we have different administrations coming with the same problem statement, and more or less the same prescription, but what was lacking in the past, either because we had successive changes of government, or because we couldn't stay long enough to see the fruition of some of these policy changes and policy interventions, because these are difficult. There are no quick fixes. So I can tell you, anywhere I go, people ask me, so what's the big framework? What's the plan that this government is going to launch? Most probably is a work in progress, focus on these structural problems that we have, and I hope after 1-2 years, people can start seeing all these interventions falling into place. So most probably we will stick to the previous framework. The next policy framework is the midterm review of the 12th Malaysian Plan. We have to align and we have to translate the next strategic focus of the governments in key driving new engines, the pivot to energy transition and green technology, to try to digitalize and scale up digital adoption across the board much better. You will see some translations of the midterm review so that we can reallocate resources and focus better on those areas. Beyond that, in fact, we will start the work on 13 Malaysian Plan next year. So the next big policy framework will be 13 Malaysian Plan. But at the same time, we already have a lot of frameworks and blueprints, and I don't intend to add new blueprints. Because for digital transformation, we already have my digital blueprints. For energy transition, we already have the national energy policy. For transitioning our economy and society towards SDG and focusing on ESG, there is already frameworks for that. So what we hope to be able to do is to demonstrate in order to convince not just people in this room, but the whole country and our international partners and investors that we will be able to fix the root causes of these problems better, one by one. And I think that's a better pathway in the next few years, rather than coming up with big pronouncements and big plans, but fall short successively on the delivery.
Thank you. To paraphrase, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. Prescription, if you like, the physician is in the house, the prescription is known. Now we want consistency of policy for a long enough period to ensure that the medicine is taken. Now, that being said, as we move forward, Young Muhammad, you touched on the 12th Malaysia Plan and the midterm review that is up. If it's not too early, in your mind, front of mind, hits and misses of the 12th Malaysia Plan, what we'll be looking to do to fine-tune? I mean, the point is well taken regarding the various policy measures we have in place, but one of the conversations I often have with corporate leaders is granularity.
Well, when we talk about a plan and the delivery of a plan, the hits and misses, it also depends on what KPIs you put in place to track the plan. And for our own Malaysian plan for this country, it also depends on which party or stakeholders you ask about the delivery. So take, for example, in our internal process, the delivery of 12 Malaysian plans are tracked by way of a list of initiatives. If the initiatives have taken off, have been completed, as always, is always on track. 70% in progress. So I will be, I think I will not focus entirely on what's on paper, how many goals and targets have been achieved, but we also have to focus on the big macro and fiscal targets that we have. So the big challenge now is, for example, for fiscal consolidation, we are looking at 3.2% deficit in 2025. It's very tough for us because we came in after COVID, and there was a huge jump in government's debt and much higher deficits for the first 2 years compared to what was planned in 12th Malaysian Plan in the beginning, 2021, 2022. But I think we are quite positive that I think we will meet the target, come what may. The trick is not just meeting that 3.2% fiscal consolidation target. The trick is to make sure that while we move towards that and manage our public finances better, we have to make sure that we reallocate resources and financial means in the most catalytic manner as possible. And that's is basically getting a much better value from a much less that we have, because if this administration decides to depart from that fiscal consolidation target in 2025, and we have every reason to do that, actually. We have the justification if we want to say that, you can't expect us to try to manage with that kind of fiscal consolidation target, given what was left to us. The debt, the size of expenditure, some of the projects that had already in progress, because you can't just switch it off. You have to continue and complete. So we have the justification. But my concern, and I think this is our resolve in this administration, is that the public and the private sector and the global investment community needs to believe that we mean business when we say that we will manage the public finances better, and we will be able to get the better value with better governance. So most probably we are looking at smaller in terms of financial resources that we have with us. And that's why I think focusing on what matters most to the economy and to the public is important, to make sure that we strike the right balance between growing and at the same time making sure that it's as inclusive as possible. So that's why 2023, I think, is a glimpse of what is coming, but 2024 will be the first full-fledged budget based on our approach. So we will be focusing a lot more on the most vulnerable. What was left before with less and less budget. It sounds small, putting more money into fixing schools and hospitals and roads. It sounds, I suppose, to all of you is nothing spectacular about it. But when the government successively draw away the budget from this basic infrastructure for other things, we have a society that has to live with this for the last 10, 15 years. So the nature and quality of public service to the people who need it most, not us in this room, but those people in rural area, in kampong semua, the downslide of the quality of life, if we don't intervene now, is going to get worse and worse and worse. So we have to make that tough decisions that as much as we need money for some other things, we can't ignore this. What is left then is to focus on how we can drive the growth in 3 or 4 sectors that I say. And I think we can do this from adopting a different approach in implementation. Datuk Sri Anwar mentioned about IPR. It's not so much the program that I think is important for us. It is to prove that this approach can be successful. People talk about one whole nation approach over and over again, but this is one of the first few initiatives of this administration that really put to test this one whole nation approach. Because in order to lift out about 200,000 households out of poverty, you can't just rely on them, you can't just rely on government. We need the whole ecosystem. We need the off-takers, we need the local businesses, we need the imams, we need the retirees, we need the younger ones. The government has to give land. And if it works, I think it will be able to make sure that with whatever much less financial resources that we have, with the conviction from the public and other stakeholders, we will get better yields of results with other things and other initiatives that we roll out after this.
Well, thank you. Moving back, 12th Malaysia Plan was some 400 billion. Of course, we know it's been front-end loaded because of COVID, leaving you less to spend for the future. Now, Young Muhammad, you were touching on, if for want of a better term, more bang for your buck, better efficiency, better yields. Do you envisage a scaling up of the 12th Malaysia Plan, or will it remain within, because we have that underlying theme of fiscal constraint, which the market we need to demonstrate. And the other piece is, does that represent an opportunity for public-private partnerships, PFIs? Would that be back on the table again?
At this moment, I think we will be able to deliver and stick to that 400 billion worth of development expenditure all the way to 2025. So I'm quite confident that we will be able to stick with that. What I want to make sure is that all the amount that is earmarked for development expenditure actually really go into actual development expenditure. Because what we have to contend with in the last few years was development expenditure that had to be used to pay, for example, for debts. Development expenditure that we had to pay for some PFIs that didn't work, some bailouts, so much so that for whatever amount that we announce, more or less about 50%, only 50% went to actual infrastructure or allocation into catalytic sectors. So on that basis, basically, I think if we can maintain the fiscal discipline, and from my perspective of managing the development expenditure, part of it as well is about the delivery. Sometimes in our government system, cost overrun is quite normal. In private sector, cost overrun will invite huge accountability and criticisms because you went to your board with an amount of money and you have to deliver it within that amount of money. If you cross that amount of money, you have to go back to your board. That's not how public projects work. You go and with a project, with a ceiling amount that the government approves, and then you roll out the cash flow from year to year. Of course, in the beginning, at the start of the project, when it was approved, you have specifics. This will be completed within 5 years, within this spec, and within this cost. More often than not, that doesn't happen. What should be delivered within 5 years, sometimes were delivered within, sometimes drag all the way to 8 years, sometimes 15 years. So even if there was no fraudulent leakages, even if it's just pure delay, project delay, a delay of 5-6 years, obviously will mark up the price because of inflation. The costing was done when it was 5 years ago, and it was supposed to be completed 5 years ago. And obviously, when you double up the time taken to deliver public projects, the cost also will increase. So as these running projects run into cost overrun one after another, as you announce the annual development budget, those projects will take out the budget from new projects that would have been possible if those cost overruns had not happened. I hope you appreciate that when running development budget of 90 billion, the size of projects all over the country, while it is 2 million there, 10 million here, but if you total up this cost overrun, it begins to have a problem. So when we talk about our commitment to get the value and to remain with the budget commitment of 400 billion, we're also looking to make sure that we stick to the discipline of project delivery, that it has to be delivered on time. It has to avoid the kind of cost overruns that was normal in the past. And even if we do this without any grand plan or out of the box intervention, we will get a much better value of public money in the next 2, 3, 4 years. And that's one of the so-called low-hanging fruits that we are focusing at my ministry and all the other ministries within the government system.
Well, thank you. At the exchange, we focus on ESG, but actually, Tan Sri and myself really focus on social. Because if we don't look after people, the environment is a poor second, and governance is given, it's very necessary. Now, that is my segue into my next topic, which is, of course, enabling technology. And I'm very happy that we have the partnership. If I'm to believe my WhatsApp, I have a partnership with Maybank on Greening Fund and SMEs, and UMW will be part of that. And that's something we're building. Now, the investment, the government leads, and the government can drive that pivot into a high-income economy. Now, we strongly believe that technology is the key to that. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I've repeated this in so many different forums before, we have that mismatch. We have a workforce that are fairly qualified in terms of degree-wise and qualification-wise, but the kind of pay that they get just does not commensurate with their expectation. And of course, that's, as Dato' Omar says, and all of us are fully aware, it's because of the content of our economy. The easiest next step is, of course, one is energy transition, the other one is digitalization. In the case of energy transition, it's not just an ESG requirement, it is actually an economic imperative, because we have to gradually loosen our dependency on gas as the main energy source, especially for the power, because first is finite, second is in the future, if gas prices continue at its current rate, to maximize the return to the country, we always have to make that decision. Is it better that we sell and export this gas as LNG to other markets which will pay more, or do we use it at subsidized rate within our system for our power consumption? If we continue at the current rate of gas consumption in our power sector, for example, there will come a point not too long in the future where we have to start thinking about importing LNG. So it's actually an economic imperative, and the best way for us to loosen this dependency is to push for more and more alternative and substitute to gas. One obvious choice is biomass. The technology is there, it's within our system. It's just that before, it was left, in my opinion, it was left to the industry to make that decision. Likewise, there's other countries are moving faster than us relatively when it comes to developing ammonia as an alternative fuel, because next to LNG, the next that most probably is possible to be transportable is ammonia. We've done ammonia in the past, we just need to focus using the advantages that we have so that we become a leader in green ammonia, for example. Now, most probably, if we were to leave this to the market to pivot themselves, waiting for the organic growth, we will not be able to keep up with the growth and pace that we need to become a regional leader. And that's why, in the case of transition to green energy, I think the government will focus a lot more, not just on the policy framework, but to actively get involved with the industry players, either in the form of funding, either in the form of cobbling together, either in the form of incentive grants. My ministry is already talking to different industries, because it's common for industries to come to government and say, we need assistance, we need subsidy. Our approach now is no subsidy, but we can consider working together on energy transition pivots that these industries have to make, with some government incentive, some of the equity being put by them, and some in the form of debts. And I think this is going to be approached sector by sector, and hopefully by doing that, it will expedite technology growth, it will create more jobs in these areas, and the same with digitalization. I've mentioned in the past that as a market, we're quite small. There's only about 30 million plus users here. And to expect a few tech companies that have 20, 15 million users per day on one platform from Malaysia, that's quite far-fetched. So the best catalyst for digital adoption in this country is actually through public service. Because you have 30 million people who deal with government every day, and that's the best way to get around that economies of scale problem when it comes to digital adoption. And that's why we've spoken, I think, progressively lately about the need to pivot government's service from one that looks at IT as just the final interface, because that's how it is now. We have manual system and process, everything is designed manually, but because the public needs to click through the internet, so you have a website. That's very different from what it needs to be, which is one that is centralized over a data lake, for example, where all the data sits centrally, and then you design and manage government interfaces on day-to-day basis through APIs. And if we can do that, we can break silos, we can create a lot more work in these areas that require software engineers, data scientists, data engineers, and most importantly, it will elevate the digital demand, and also hopefully once we cross a certain digital adoption line, it will make Malaysia a lot more attractive to tech players around the world, because we have the economies of scale when it comes to digital adoption. Of course, plans are plans. Plans are usually common sense, but the devils are in the details. So I hope as we go through one sector after sector, one initiative after initiative, it builds the building blocks that within 1 year, 2 years, not only the public and the private sector have a clarity of what we are doing, but also you are convinced that we know where we are going. We've proven that we stay longer on the problem, and therefore, hopefully, we will have a much higher chance of translating all these structural pivots that we have to do for our economy. Zafrul is already here, and I have to rush to Parliament because saya menggulung perbahasan hari ini kan. So, is that the last question, Dr. Omar?
It isn't. I have many questions, Yang Berhormat, but I do appreciate your time, and you have been most generous with it today, so thank you very much.